You know, I can kind of understand it when you want to tear down statues of Confederate generals, or even though I'm not even sympathetic to this, I can understand why, as a slave owner, people might want to tear down a statue of Thomas Jefferson or George Washington. But now they're coming for the great emancipator himself, Abraham Lincoln, and that's where I got to draw the line. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is The Right Angle. Wow, it's been that kind of day. Brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. All right, gentlemen, there's a young man in Boston. His name is Tory Bullock. Sorry, I've taken extensive notes on this because I don't want to make any mistakes. Seems like a nice young kid based on his way his petition is written. He's collected more than 9,200 signatures so far, calling for the removal of the Emancipation Memorial statue in Boston. And Boston Mayor Marty Walsh, a Democrat, is on board with this thing already, even though it's a fairly small number of signatures. The statue's been there for over 100 years. 1879, I think, is when it went up. And it is a replica. This part is news to me because I've seen this statue. I didn't know this part. It's a replica of an original statue built with funds contributed by freed slaves in the post-Civil War era. Bill, I can understand a young man caught up in the heat of the moment looking at this statue and thinking maybe it needs to go. But isn't somebody like the mayor supposed to be a little more mature, a little more responsible, a little wiser, and not jump on board this particular bandwagon?
Yes.
Thank you for...
Look, we wouldn't be having any of these, certainly none of these statute problems if anybody decided to enforce the law. And the law not being enforced is not the job of the people who are breaking the law. I know that sounds like a fairly simple thing, but it seems to be beyond the understanding of most Democratic politicians. Their job is to uphold the law. I don't cut this kid a lot of slack either, to be honest with you, Steve. You said you draw the line at Abraham Lincoln. I draw the line before Robert E. Lee. And the reason I do, and the reason I do is that Robert E. Lee the statue of Robert E. Lee is not there because of Robert E. Lee's slave. He was not a slave trader. Robert E. Lee was a great military leader, and a lot of people died in that war. And since you can't do a memorial for everybody who died in that war, you do one for Robert E. Lee. If you want to go with the slave, if you want to say, well, Robert E. Lee was fighting for the Confederacy because he had slaves, then you go after George Washington, you go after Thomas Jefferson, and all the rest of many of the founders. And if it's okay to pull down a statue of Thomas Jefferson because he held slaves, then there's no end to it. Thomas Jefferson, the memorial to Thomas Jefferson, is not there because of Thomas Jefferson's slave trade. That's there because Thomas Jefferson was able to put into words the idea of individual protections for individual people. Now, it's true that those did not apply to blacks at the time or to women either. But he's a product of the time, and the protections that he established for white males has over the course of this history been extended to pretty much everybody. And this is why this whole thing has got to stop. Yeah. Because this destruction of the past is not rooted on any sense of reason. When you go after statues like George, let's just stay with Abraham Lincoln. Yeah. Then what you're trying to do is you're not trying to erase slavery. You're not trying to erase glorification of slavery. You're trying to destroy the past. And the reason you want to destroy the past is because the past is a standard that you have to live up to. This is the essence of progressivism, is the idea that we're going to make new people, and the people that we make won't do anything bad, and they're going to all be like angels because we'll have gotten rid of all of these old prejudices and so on. And the entire reason you have statues of historical figures is to remind you that things don't really change in terms of the human structure of things, but you can improve the government structure. And the government of the United States has improved significantly in most ways, if only because it's included now women, includes blacks, includes sexual orientation. All of these ideas of protecting you and you being able to go out there and speak your mind and all of this stuff that these people are protesting about were invented by guys like Thomas Jefferson. And if Thomas Jefferson or Abraham Lincoln, for that matter, were flawed individuals, then that's not a reason to tear down their statues. That's a reason to learn more about the fact that great people had great faults and flaws, and all people have faults and flaws. And perhaps this young man ought to start thinking about what his own personal faults and flaws are before he starts deciding he's going to tear down something that was donated by the actual people who were actually held in slavery, who held Abraham Lincoln in such high regard that the actual slaves put this money together. And some rich white kid who's never understood anything other than total affluence, no fear whatsoever of his actions, has now made a moral decision that he knows better than what the actual slaves who lived through slavery know. This white kid has a better idea of what slavery was than the actual slaves. And the actual black slaves that raised the money to put the statue up, they don't count for anything. They're in the past. They're not real like this kid is. I would warn anybody who wants to do this on the left, anybody who feels the need to destroy history, I would warn you not about the recent past. I would just ask you, look to your own present. Every single one of the liberal firebrands who's spoken anything that is not as far left as the lunatic fringe is has been eaten alive by your own team. So you are in a death cult right now. And I think it's about time you got out of it. And one of the reasons that kids like this are doing this, Steve, is because there is no price to be paid for it. And he expects to be greatly rewarded by this morally. He's expecting that this is going to make him into a champion. See, he was so advanced morally, so advanced that he was willing, on the part of black people, to pull down statues of Abraham Lincoln because they're so offensive to black people.
I should mention Tony Bullock is a black kid. He's not a white kid taking up the mantle of revolution or whatever.
It doesn't matter in the slightest.
It doesn't.
It doesn't matter in the slightest.
What you do remind me of, though, Bill, is whether you're talking about the French Jacobins trying to restart history at year one, or the Russian communists trying to build a new Soviet man,
or the new Nazi man, all of it. It results in rivers of blood.
Yes. In every case, it's just an excuse to kill a whole lot of people.
It is an excuse. That's right. Is an excuse for people who are naturally violent, who like to smash things, beat people up, and watch things burn. It gives them a moral fig leaf to allow them to go out and commit these acts of arson and rape and murder and vandalism. You know, the word vandalism comes from an actual tribe called the Vandals. They basically sacked Rome, and they had all of these incredibly difficult to create marble statues that were a result of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people's work over centuries. And some bearded savage with a hammer smashes the face off of one of these things, and he thinks, wow, look at me. That's great. It's easier to smash a statue than it is to sculpt one. And when you can sculpt a statue like that, and you put the time in necessary, and you produce a statue of that same quality, then I'd be willing to listen to your opinion about destroying statues. And until then, you're just another punk with a hammer and a need to show off and a need to show everybody how virtuous you are. And I'm not buying it.
Bill, you made me think of a question for Scott here. Scott, let me read to you from Tony's petition here. And Bill was talking about maybe something better or at least equal to. So let's read what Tony had to say. He said the statue is supposed to represent freedom, but instead represents us, black people, still beneath someone else. I would always ask myself, if he's free, why is he still on his knees? Talking about the freed slave in the statue. No kid should have to ask themselves that question anymore. If you feel the same, sign the petition. Is there a case to be made, maybe not for tearing down this statue, but for erecting another one with a message that to some eyes might not be as muddled?
You know, sometimes I think we need a museum of out-of-favor statues, where we just kind of take every statue that is kind of past its time or past its prime or currently does not tickle the fancy of whatever generation happens to be in existence at that moment and put it in a warehouse where if you want to, you can go see these sort of out-of-favor statues. And then someday, when the cycle comes around again and people start realizing, oh, well, the reason for this was that, and there was justification for why we wanted to remember this, and then they put them back until somebody wants to tear them down again. I guess people must look at statues differently than I do. I don't think of them as objects of worship. I've never seen a statue of a general or a president or anything else. Even when I was at the Lincoln Memorial, I was like, wow, that's a really big rendering of Abraham Lincoln. But there was nothing about it that said I should fall down on my knees and worship him. And this was some sort of representation that all society must do that. It captures an important moment in history. It causes reflection. But frankly, most public statues, are for most people are pigeon perches. They're things that you don't even notice as you go past them, day after day. And only by the fact that these protesters have drawn attention to the statues are they getting any kind of play in the press that would suggest a racial undertone or racism, because essentially people are saying that's what it's about. Like, hey, this statue that you've walked past every day on your way to Starbucks and before you got to the office, well, by the way, that's a symbol of racism. You're like, oh, really? I thought it was just collecting pigeon poop, but it's actually something that I should be upset about. Well, I'd never really reflected upon it that much. There's an old little couplet that says, search all your parks in all your cities, you'll find no statues of committees. And the reason for that is because accomplishments are done by individuals. And as Bill pointed out, all individuals are flawed. And so if you looked into anybody's life, you would find reason to tear down their statue. I guess the mayor of this town and the kid who put together the petition should ask themselves, how long would my statue last?
There wouldn't be one of them because they haven't done anything great. They're just, it's true these men had great flaws, but they also had great greatness. And just to respond to this petition that the kid said, we should get rid of the statue because the kneeling black person reminds us of slavery. Okay, if we take the statue down, does that mean we'll never hear about slavery again? It's not Abraham Lincoln who's constantly living 150, 250 years ago. It's you. It's you who cannot get over slavery. It's you who talk about slavery like it happened to you or it happened to your father instead of the father of your father. So if you're telling me that this thing needs to go because it reminds you of slavery, it would be worth losing that statue if you could actually get to the point where you could say this is 6-7 generations behind us now. Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't be thinking so much about slavery and what happened to my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. Maybe I should start thinking about the future and what I'm going to do with my life.
Yeah, a lot of great points. Bill, I'm glad you said the angry stuff that I would have wanted to say so I can go at kind of a different angle here. At the end, I'm 51 years old now, and I think that means I'm a member of the last generation that was required to take humanities in high school, and I'm so glad that I did, and I'm so sorry for the younger generations who weren't required to take humanities and learn about the art history of Western civilization, because it teaches you how to look at art. And as a result of taking humanities, I learned a love of great statues as great art. And most monuments are not great art. They serve their purpose, and that's about it. But I think the Emancipation statue in Boston is above average for a monument. Let me tell you why, because I think Tory Bullock has missed something in his education. I want to help him see this statue in the way that it was intended by the freed slaves who raised the money to get the original built over 100 years ago. Lincoln in this statue, yes, he's standing, but his job is done. His action is over. He isn't the point of this statue. Let's get that picture on the screen here. Look at the slave. He's not crouching in submission. He's not looking up at Lincoln in awe. He's not looking down on the ground in shame. His shackles are broken. That's the thing that Lincoln did. But look at that freed slave's posture. He's not crouching. He's beginning to rise. He is about to take his first steps as a free man. That's thrilling. That's compassionate. It's a frozen moment in time that we need to remember, and we need to look in awe at this man, this freed man, about to take his first steps as such. It's a thrilling thing to see, and I'm sorry your generation can't see it, but maybe you can open your eyes a little wider and see it now. That's your right angle on that. I'm Steve Green. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.